y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Christina and I love the Baby Whisperer. This is her book that I basically live by, and I am just making these videos so I can share a little bit more about my experience with the things in her book, the way that I did them with my daughter, and hopefully I can help to shed some light and put some input into the things that you might be reading if you own this book as well. There is not a lot of content out there on the internet of people, of parents who, like Tracy Hogg, who do or did her method with their kids. There's some old forums out there that haven't really been touched in a few years, and so I really just want to start a conversation and a dialogue on the internet about these things. So today I just wanted to talk about routine and essentially just the way that Tracy practically brings routine into our lives with her methods. So she starts off very practical in the first 4 months and puts many schedules down in her book that even are attached to times, and they're just sample schedules. With a routine, you're really not supposed to be too strict. We want to be gentle and caring and loving towards our children and not push them into a box. But there are general times as our child grows that, it's going to be nap time, and we're going to have a pretty good idea of what that looks like for our child and what time that's going to take place at. So I just wanted to go through basically her entire book and everywhere that she talks about routines and schedules and talk about what that looks like in the first 2 years. All of those sample schedules she gives at the beginning of the first 4 months are very helpful, but after that she kind of drops off and doesn't necessarily have a very cohesive way of explaining how you should drop feeds and drop naps and how long your child should be sleeping still at 2 years old, for example. So I just want to kind of put all the information in one place for us all. She does have bits and snippets here and there in the book where she mentions where you drop naps and when you need to drop feeds and things like that, but she doesn't necessarily have it all in one place. So that's what I'm trying to aim to do here in this video to make it easier for you if you're a parent whose child is growing older and you've been doing the Baby Whisperer and you're just not sure when they're supposed to drop their cat nap, for example. Then hopefully this video will shed some insight into what she says in the book. But essentially, let's just start with the 0 to 3 month window. She has lots of sample schedules in her book on this, especially during the feeding chapter for newborns, and that's basically the most important part of the schedule in the first 3 months is getting those feeds in, having them fed throughout the day so that they can sleep longer at night. And so the goal by 3 months is essentially a perfect 3-hour feeding schedule where during the day you're feeding your baby every 3 hours, and then at night you do a dream feed, and the goal is by 3 months to have the only nightly feed be that dream feed and to hopefully drop those other nighttime feeds by 3 months. That's a pretty great goal to aim for, is all of that done by 3 months. But there's she has several samples in her book of what it should look like at 1 week, at 1 month, at 4 weeks, things like that, and how we just do basically the eat, play, sleep cycle where we start with feeding our child in the morning. They have activity time, their wake window, which would be short at this time. Then it goes to their naps, which are going to be a little longer, and then eat again and have that cycle. There's also the idea of cluster feeding in the evening and taking probably about 4 to 5 naps a day at this time. So the biggest schedule change that you're going to see at this point now is the 3 to 4 months. So you spend the first 3 months trying to get to this 3-hour schedule. If you can do it before 3 months, great. Most babies should age appropriately be able to do it at 3 months unless they were premature. And then when you're starting to look at 4 months, that is when you transition them to the 4-month schedule. So she has a great schedule example in her Pick Up Put Down chapter. She might actually have another sample of it somewhere else, but she talks about how you get to the 4-hour schedule in Pick Up Put Down. And it's because you want to be on a 4-hour schedule. If you are going to sleep train using Pick Up Put Down, you should be on that 4-hour schedule before you start. The 4-hour schedule, in my opinion, is the greatest schedule that you can possibly have. I do keep using the word schedule, and I really personally, I use it interchangeably with routine, especially when we are looking at times and I'm saying like, oh yes, my daughter naps at 9. What's really so important at this stage is the routine. Tracy doesn't really use the word schedule, that's just me interjecting myself in there a little bit. Since my daughter's a textbook baby, she does really well with predictable timetables and things like that. So I have been pretty with her, at least on top of like certain times of day where our routine is connected to. So what I really enjoyed about the 4-month routine was that it did kind of feel more like a schedule. There is a brain change that happens in our children where their circadian rhythm matures at this time. So they actually do get tired regularly at certain times. If they always go down for a nap at 9, then they're going to start, you don't really have to watch their cues. They're just going to start to get used to sleeping at 9. They're going to get tired at 9. And even if they don't seem tired at 9 some days, they will be tired very shortly after. So at the 4-month routine, that's when you drop a nap. So you go to 3 total naps, and you also drop a feed. So you're feeding every 4 hours during the day plus a dream feed, and there should be no nighttime feeds at all. So your day will look like waking up with a feed. 2 hours later, they'll go down for a 2-hour nap. Then they'll wake up for another feed. They'll have a 2-hour wake window, go down for another 2-hour nap, another feed, 2-hour wake window, then a short cat nap that shouldn't be longer than 40 to 45 minutes. And then they have, this part is kind of switched, then they have their activity time, and then they eat one last time before bed, and then you wake them for their dream feed. Well, you don't really wake them. You get them up for their dream feed, and then they should be sleeping at least 8 hours straight through the night. That is the most amazing schedule ever, in my opinion. That's like 4.5 hours of nap time during the day, plus about 11 hours of sleep at night, which is fantastic. And after this point in the book is kind of where it gets a little iffy of what to do next. Your next biggest thing that you're going to do is introduce solids at some point between 4 and 6 months. So in her solids chapter, she does outline some solids feeding schedules. They're not really concrete because at this point we're going to start adjusting our routine and adjusting what our schedule looks like based on our baby individually. And definitely based on how well they take solids. So at this point, you may be waking up your child in the morning, breastfeeding them, and then waiting about an hour or so to feed them solids. But there could be some situations in which you might actually want to start with solids and then breastfeed after. Or sometimes you don't even need to wait that full hour. You can breastfeed and then immediately give them solids. It just kind of depends on your child. And so the goal here with starting solids is to integrate 3 meals a day. And you're going to do that very slowly. I talk all about it in my video about her solids chapter, which you can find linked up here. However, those meal times, they're really flexible is what they are. So at this point, you can kind of work them into your child's routine. You can work them into your own schedule. You can set their breakfast, lunch, and dinner whenever is convenient for you. However, you also want to be paying attention to your child and to their hunger cues and things like that. You don't want to make them wait too long, and you don't want them to be too dependent on breast milk at this point. So for me at this point, I would feed my daughter at 7 a.m. I'd breastfeed her. Then by 8 a.m. I would give her solids for breakfast. Then she would go down for a nap around 9 or 9:30 because her naps kind of started getting shorter around this time too. And that was just something I had to watch and observe in her. Then I'd wake her at 11. We'd eat solids by noon. She would go down for a nap around 1 or 1:30, wake up at 3, breastfeed, and then I would do her cat nap, and I was able to give her dinner after her cat nap and then breastfeed her one last time to kind of cap off the day. You might have to do dinner before the cat nap. It really just depends on your child, and you might even need a snack. They probably won't the second that you introduce solids need a snack for them to have, but that would be the time that you give them that snack is after they wake up around 3. Then when you hit 7 months, you're going to be focusing on dropping the dream feed. And you can do this a little sooner if you feel like your child is ready. But after 7 months, it's not really age appropriate for them to be eating at night at all. They should be able to go 12 hours without eating. So for example, they could have their nighttime meal at 7 p.m., go down for bed shortly after at 7:30, and then they should be able to make it until 7 a.m. And she has a whole outline for how to drop the dream feed in her food chapter as well. Then you're going to be looking for anytime between 7 and 9 months, you're going to be looking to drop the cat nap. I believe she recommends more during 8 and 9 months to drop the cat nap. You really want to do it after the dream feed is gone, so you're not changing too many things at once. So once they're really adjusted to that lack of a dream feed, then you can focus on dropping their cat nap. I actually was kind of expecting my daughter to do this a little naturally, and she did not at all. So I dropped her cat nap around 9.5 months, which is pretty late. I almost wish I did it sooner. I think I just really liked being able to cook dinner during her cat nap. So I did have, it was unfortunate to lose that time. But when I dropped her cat nap, I just pushed her bedtime forward. So I pushed her bedtime to 7 p.m. instead of 7:30. And her naps, because she had a longer wake window, her naps kind of adjusted a little too. So she was able to be awake until 10 a.m., take a nap until 11 or 11:30, and then her next nap was around 2 to 3:30, and then she was able to go that 3:30 to 7 o'clock stretch. And that was a really easy nap for us to drop. I think I just dropped it one day and she never really needed a cat nap again. It might take some time for your child to adjust, so keep that in mind. Also, around this time, you're going to drop a daytime feed as well. You're probably still breastfeeding about 4 times a day, or bottle feeding 4 times a day at this point. But you'll start to notice, especially as your child does depend more on solids and might be even picking up finger foods around 8 months, that they don't necessarily need one of their afternoon feeds. And this is something, again, you'll want to watch for with your child. If they start having a feed where they're eating significantly less than usual, then it probably means that they are ready to drop one of their feeds. I believe at this point is when I dropped the 3 p.m. feed. I don't think Tracy really talks about this at all in her book, but she does say that your child should be getting about 3 bottles or 3 nursing sessions a day around this age, and they should be, it's basically to help them transition more to eating more solids and depending on solids more than depending on formula or breast milk. And what I did at this point was I was really looking ahead to when she turned 1. So I turned our 11 a.m. feed into, I kind of pushed it back to lunchtime at noon, and I gave her a bottle, so she would just have a bottle of formula with her lunch essentially. And I would have just pumped, personally. I just couldn't at this point. I couldn't pump enough for her to have a full bottle of breast milk, so that's why I did the formula. And I really felt like it was important to integrate a bottle every single day at this point, so that by the time we got to 1 year and I wanted to wean her onto cow's milk, that the transition would go smoother because she was used to already having a feed out of the bottle. And the rest with feed times is really up to you. Around age 1, they should only be having breast milk or formula twice a day, and at that point you can just switch that to cow's milk if that's what you want. They should be consuming, I believe it's around 16 ounces a day of breast milk, formula, or cow's milk. And so I just kept our morning and evening feeds like that and ended up basically integrating a bottle of cow's milk with breakfast and with dinner. And her naps stayed about the same at this point. She just had 2 naps. And actually now she still just has 2 naps and she has 2 bottles of milk a day. And right now she's 16 months. So the big milestone next is by 18 months they should be on a 1 nap schedule. And that is something that I haven't started to work on yet. But I know in her book, Tracy Hogg talks about doing 2 naps into 1 on her chapter on like sleep problems in children over 1. And so I plan to do what she says. You kind of have to go a little slow with this one. I believe it's difficult to gauge if your child is ready or not to go from 2 naps to 1. It's a really big transition. So I'm just planning on taking the next 2 months to slowly get her to take 1 nap regularly. And that nap will be ideally around 12. It'll start around noon. They'll eat lunch before, and then it should go until about 2 or 2:30, maybe even 3 if that's what they need. And then still you're going to have them sleep 12 hours a night, ideally from 7 to 7. Then the next big change that's coming up is around 2 years, they actually don't need to drink cow's milk anymore. I think a lot of parents still give their children cow's milk. I don't see why not. It's not like it hurts them, but it's not as required. Obviously they're getting all of their nutrition from solids by age 1, and that cow's milk during that year from 1 to 2 is just really a helpful way to make sure that they're getting enough nutrients. So if you don't like cow's milk, or you want to switch to something else, or you just are tired of buying it, then you can just stop giving it at that time. And you'll also be looking for signs of readiness to drop that 1 nap around age 2. They could keep it until they're 3. It really depends on your child at this point. This is why I said that things kind of get iffy. As your child ages, you're really just looking at them and seeing what they need. So I have a feeling that my daughter will probably be taking a nap until she's at least 2.5. She really loves naps, and I couldn't imagine that at age 2 she would need to drop it. But if you have a more spirited child, or a child that, you know, has never really liked naps at all, or has taken very short ones, then you might find around age 2 that they just don't take one at all. And maybe they even just go to bed a little early and get more than 12 hours at night. It's really up to you at this point. It's up to what you feel like they need. And then the Baby Whisperer, she does add, again in her chapter on sleep in older children at the very beginning of the chapter, that she believes all children should sleep 12 hours a night until they're 5 years old. So that is kind of a good gauge for kind of helping you with that sleep, all your sleep and nap questions, that maybe your child will be sleeping 12 hours a night until they're 5, and then you can kind of just from there cut their bedtime back, let them stay up later. But again, it's up to you. If they're 4 and they can stay up a little later than they have been, then great. Just make sure that you are paying attention to your child, paying attention to them, and that you're not trying to follow a strict routine that some book says you're supposed to follow. All of her routine and schedule samples are just suggestions, and so you never have to follow them exactly. I think they're more important in the beginning to follow closer to the letter, just because I think that she does a really great job at making schedules that are very age appropriate. But as we hit 6 months, from there it needs to be more temperament and baby specific. So that's just my overview of what schedule should look like in the first few years of life. Hopefully that gives you some insight into where your child should be, whatever stage they might be in. I know it helps me to kind of have that all laid out so I can think to the future, and I can think, oh, after I drop this nap, then I'm just gonna have to watch her and see what happens after that. And so that just kind of gives us a heads up for what might happen and when it might happen. Anyway, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Comment below your experience with anything that I talked about. If you've read The Baby Whisperer, if you haven't, if this is your first time hearing about her, I would love to hear from you. Also, feel free to subscribe so you can be updated when more videos are released. I'm hoping to do little quick tidbit videos like this that just kind of talk about basically what Tracy Hogg says, but go in a little deeper. So if there's any topic that you want to see me talk about, then feel free to comment that below as well. I'd love to hear from y'all. Thanks for watching.